What's Nick Robertson's future with the Leafs franchise, and could the Leafs be looking to reunite with an old Leaf legend as the trade hunt continues? You're listening to the Locked On Leafs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day.
You're Locked On Maple Leafs, your daily podcast on the Toronto Maple Leafs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome into the Locked On Leafs podcast, a daily Maple Leaf-centric podcast hosted by myself, Mike DiStefano, and my co-host, Dave Morassutti. This episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use the code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. What's happening, Dave? How are we feeling?
Doing good. Unfortunately, the Jays streak is over.
Yeah. 10 games, 10 wins in a row is pretty impressive, though. It is impressive.
It is.
It's hilarious how over the course of the last 6 weeks, the Chicago White Sox are the one team that they seem to can't beat. Again, I guess they won this series, but Chicago's beaten them like 3 times over the course of the last few weeks here. It's kind of reminiscent to the way it was with the Maple Leafs a couple years ago. It's like, yeah, they can go out, they can, get wins against Boston, they could get wins against Edmonton, against Vegas, some of the best teams in the league, and then they'd always lose to the Buffalo Sabres and the Arizona Coyotes. What is it with the Toronto-based teams just consistently losing to sub 500 clubs, no matter the sport?
It's a curse. It's the Toronto curse. It's the only way I can say.
Yeah, the Toronto curse is right. All right, Dave, we got a fun show to do. It may turn into a 2-part show. We'll see where the day goes, but over the next couple of days, there's been some talk about Nick Robertson and what his future could be with the Toronto Maple Leafs. He did file for arbitration, so that will have to get dealt with at some point here. But I've got some thoughts as to what maybe the future beholds for Nick Robertson. Our trade hunt series continues today. There's another player that is kind of popping up on the trade bait boards around the NHL that is garnering some interest from some teams that I think the Maple Leafs might be able to kind of throw their hat into the ring. A former Maple Leaf kind of. We'll get to that in a little bit. And we said yesterday we're going to talk about the CBA and what's new in the CBA that was ratified, giving us labor peace through till 2030. So we'll get to the changes and what it means for the Leafs and the league once we talk about that. So that's what we got on tap for today. Let's start with the Leaf news. Talk about Nick Robertson, and Chris Johnston was on his podcast earlier today. I believe it was his final show before he kind of leaves for the summer. Obviously Johnston very plugged in with the Maple Leafs. He kind of had a little bit of an update / a comment about Nick Robertson and his standing with the Maple Leafs. What was it, Dave?
Don't expect Nick Robertson to go anywhere, essentially, is what he was putting out there, because we know even though he is heading towards arbitration, the Leafs could technically consider trading him, right, at some point down the road. And we know that it's been an off and on relationship between Robertson and the Leafs, right? Brad Chilling was able to convince him to play out the year after he requested a trade, and it kind of went quiet, right? We didn't really hear about, like, did he still feel that way? What made him decide that, okay, he'll stick around for the year? Like, we didn't really get much of an update on that. So kind of left a little open end of what Robertson's future is going to be. And this also stems from the fact that, yeah, he had 15 goals this year, but again, in the playoffs, there really wasn't a role for him. And you would think maybe he would have seen if there was an opportunity to just go and get a reset somewhere else, but it looks like that's not going to happen. It looks like he is going to stay in the fold, at least from what we're hearing from Chris Johnson.
Yeah, and It's interesting because on one hand, you understand it. The Maple Leafs, they need a goal scorer, a point producer in the top six, and Nick Robertson, he can shoot the puck pretty well. Probably one of the better shooters on the Maple Leafs, not named Austin Matthews
Yep.
and William Nylander. Nick Robertson might slot into the three hole there in terms of pure shot. And there's a hole for him on the right side to go and be a right winger on this team. That being said, it just doesn't feel like Robertson and Berube will see eye to eye. Like they tried it last year, and how many regular season games did he end up playing? I think he played like 56 regular season games. He was healthy for like the first time in his career, had a full healthy season. Only checked into 69 games. So that means that he was a healthy scratch for 13 games in the regular season, then only played 3 games in the playoffs. It was a healthy scratch for a majority of the playoffs. Like clearly the coaching staff does not view Nick Robertson as a player that can come in and be a piece for these guys. Why do you think Craig or Brad Truliving looks at him and still thinks, yeah, I think we could utilize him because the coaching staff doesn't seem to.
Well, I think part of it's his age. He's 23 years old. He's not like, 26, 27, 28. They maybe feel like there's something there that could maybe still be unlocked with him. He did show more of a willingness to be a more aggressive player, try to really push more on the forecheck. And but it just feels like there's always something missing, right? There's like kind of meat on the bone missing. In the AHL, he was actually a pretty productive player. The problem was he can never really stay healthy.
Well, there's also a big difference between the American League and
Yeah.
the National League. Like
Yeah.
there's a lot of guys who tear up the AHL, right? Like Alex Steves tore up the AHL. He set a new franchise record in goals for the Marlies, and they didn't even tender him a qualifying offer. They just let him walk. I think he was like Group 6 UFA or something, but they didn't bring him back. They let him walk, and he went elsewhere. I think he signed in Boston, if I'm not mistaken. There's a difference between being an AHL scorer and an NHL scorer, and obviously Nick Robertson is figuring that out. He had 14 goals last year in 56 games and had 15 goals this year in 69 games. So he can score. He does add that element of secondary, tertiary scoring when given an opportunity. It's just then when you get to the postseason, it doesn't seem like he's a likely candidate to be on this roster. So given what it might take in arbitration, what he could be awarded, which again, I was looking at Evolving Hockey, and they project a number that came in at 2.2 million for Nicholas Robertson. And I was curious about that number. It seemed a little high to me when I first saw it. But then to be honest with you, I kind of did some digging and I was taking a peek around the NHL and I'm like, well, what are other 15 goal scorers getting, who are in that age range, who are coming out of their ELCs and signing their second contracts? Well, what are those guys being paid? Why don't we take a quick break? We'll come back. I'll get into the comparables and maybe that'll shed some light onto what Nick Robertson could be getting in terms of a dollar figure, what might be a good comparable for his camp, at least when they look at arbitration. And, we could decide, is it worth it? Is it worth it for the Maple Leafs to keep it rolling with the Nick Robertson reunion? So we'll get to that and more next on the Locked On Leafs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day.
Ever wish managing money felt easier? With Monarch Money, it can. Whether you're growing your savings or planning big purchases, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is more than a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also building wealth. Obviously, if you want to look at specific categories and seeing where your money is going, that's what makes Monarch Money truly unique. You can say, all right, how much am I spending on subscriptions, or can I maybe cut a couple to save a few bucks? That's one of the many features that Monarch Money has. Also, if you work with somebody, or you're trying to manage your money with a spouse or partner, it's easier than ever with Monarch, and it takes the stress out of worrying about your finances. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKDOWNNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first order. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKDOWNNHL for half off your first year.
Welcome back into the Locked On Leafs podcast. Mike DiStefano, Dave Morassutti with you, as we are each and every weekday, Monday through Friday, free and available wherever you get your podcasts. We'll be going all off season long with Maple Leafs and NHL content. I thought about it, starting maybe either next week or maybe the week after. This is technically we're the year 2025, and at some point, Dave and I are going to do a countdown. The top 25 Maple Leafs in the last 25 years. So kind of a quarter century team where we'll kind of pick, we'll probably group it into 5 players per day. And then, 5, do the first 25 through 20, 19 through 15, 14, so on, till we get to the number one Maple Leaf over the course of the last decade. So that's something to keep an eye for and to look forward to throughout the coming weeks here on the Locked On Leafs podcast, along with any daily updates that come our way. And not necessarily an update today, but it sounds as though Chris Johnston is of the belief that Nick Robertson may be sticking around in Toronto. Sounds like that trade request will not be fulfilled this summer either. And we do know that he filed for arbitration, so there will be an ARB case that'll be settled. A date has yet to be set. I will note, and they can technically trade him prior to the arbitration case, but it doesn't sound like that's something that the Maple Leafs want to do. Maybe they feel like they owe it to themselves to give him one last chance to prove he might be a top 6 player, because there is a spot in the top 6. If Michelli plays top line right wing, that second line left wing position is open for Nick Robertson, if he wants to try and grab that. So there's a spot for Nick Robertson in the top 6 to at least compete and battle for it. But he does need a new contract, and he's going to arbitration. And the way arbitration works is both parties, the player and the team, will come equipped with an argument as to how much they believe the player is worth. Usually what happens is the player says, I'm worth way too much money, way more money than I'm worth. And the team does the opposite, and they downgrade the level of player that person is and tell them how much they suck and why they're not worth X amount of dollars. And then an independent arbitrator usually meets in the middle, and that probably is where things are going to play out here with the Maple Leafs and Nick Robertson. But Dave, I was doing a little digging and trying to think and justify, like, how could he possibly be worth $2.2 million, as an arbitration number? How could that possibly be the projection? You'd be kind of surprised, actually, like if you can dive a little deeper into the numbers and you figure out what 15 goal scorers are kind of going for nowadays coming out of their ELCs. That's kind of the going rate. It's even more than that, technically. Like, I'm going to give you a list of guys who signed contracts this summer, that had scored 15 goals, and the money they got. So Jack Quinn, 15 goal season this year, signed a contract coming out of his ELC. He's 23 years old, same age as Nick Robertson. He signed a deal, $3.375 million. I think it's a 3-year deal that he signed with Buffalo. So that there's a comparable one that Nick Robertson's camp will certainly be looking at. Robertson had less points overall than Jack Quinn, obviously, but they'll try and compare the goals and the size, I suppose, both of them being a little undersized players. If you continue to look at what some RFA players got coming out of their first couple contracts, Morgan Frost signed a deal this season after just scoring 14 goals, split between the Philadelphia Flyers and the Calgary Flames. So 14 goal, 37-point season earned him $4.375 million this summer with the Calgary Flames. Another couple names. Ridley Gregg ended up getting $3.25 million for 13 goals with the Ottawa Senators. And the list kind of goes on and on. A couple other players just to note here. I thought there was a couple more that made sense to me. Like Alex Newhook, he makes 2.9. He's 24 years old. He's coming off a season, 26 points, 15 goals. Are they going to say, yeah, he's almost like an Alex Newhook-esque player? But should he be paid like a Newhook? That could possibly be a name that they try to throw out there as a comparable. So there's a few names out there that do make sense when it comes to the production that Nick Robertson provides, and you couple it with the production of the players in and around that type of offensive production value. Yeah, I guess it kind of makes sense that he can come in a little bit over 2 million. I mean, Jack McBain just got paid 4.25 million. I get it. He's a center, he's a bigger body, and he, just a better player overall. But still, 4.25 million for a 13 goal scorer in Jack McBain. It's not inconceivable that Robertson could command as much as $2 million as an arbitration awarding.
Yeah, it's you give a good enough comparables to say, you know what, like 2.5 might have, especially depending on the term too, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because he elected the lease, will get a choice in the term, if I'm not mistaken on this one. So, that's one thing there where, like, the Leafs have the cap space. Like, I don't think they're worried about, we don't have cap space to make a Robertson arbitration award work. But it's also, okay, if you're going to pay Robertson, or if the arbitrator, I obviously this is where the Leafs want to avoid the whole arbitration thing in the first place. But let's say it does go down to that. If the arbitrator awards Robertson more, does that make the Leafs think, okay, now we're paying this guy $2.5 million? It's gonna be a lot harder to justify putting this guy in the press box now. Like, it was easier to do before, but like, this team is trying to trim the fat in a lot of ways to get rid of guys like David Kampf, maybe a Cal Yarncroc, because they just got too many guys making that type of money. That, okay, Yarncroc at least was in the lineup more so than not, but they are all kind of like rotating in because they just weren't giving enough. And so the one thing Robertson, obviously, as we said, has over the other guys is his age and the goal scoring production. Was, although Cal Yarncroc at one point did score goals. I mean, the injuries didn't help him, but that's the one thing at least Robertson could say is the production has been there, unlike the other guys.
Yeah, for sure. They've been there. The question is, like, it's not necessarily the goals, I think, that is the issue with him. Like, we know that he could score a little bit, but can they rely on him defensively? Like, that's ultimately what they're going to argue. And it's interesting because a lot of the time the arbitration, like, they don't look at all of those numbers. They kind of just look at the offensive production and they try and match it up. And that's why I brought up these names like a Jack Quinn, like an Alex Newhook, like a Jack McBain, I suppose, in terms of his age, not the same type of player, but in terms of his age, the contract that he's looking for, how long they've been in the league, and the goals, right? Like, they're all very similar in terms of production wise. And that's why I think that he'll have quite the say. He's like, look, I scored 15 goals in 69 games. Right? It took Jack Quinn 74 games to score 15 goals. He got 3.375 on a 2-year deal. I should be worth close to that, no? Like, it's an easy sell. It's an easy sell for
It's an easy case for him to put that out there for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's going to be interesting to see how this kind of plays out. But you do bring up a very valid point where they're kind of rolling the dice by electing to go to arbitration with Nick Robertson. If it comes in at a higher number than they're comfortable with, they may be forced to play him. Just because, again, like you said, you don't want $2 million withering away on a nightly basis in the press box. right? That's just not what you want to do. You'd rather use that money more efficiently and effectively than sitting up top. So, yeah, it's going to be very fascinating. I can tell you this: the writing is kind of on the wall. If they let this thing play out and it gets to arbitration, and he does get awarded, in that $2+ million range, I think the writing's on the wall where Nick Robertson, like he's going to be given every opportunity to make the team. If anything, I think he'll have to lose the spot. He'll have to lose the spot at that point. So maybe there is a much longer term partnership, or at least for this next season, than we originally thought for Nick Robertson. And it's just because simply, if you follow the money, it just has to be at this point for the Buds.
Yeah, exactly. And this is it's funny because like going into this offseason, I didn't think Nick Robertson was going to be that big of a story in my opinion. I had thought the Leafs were going to figure out a contract for him, or they were just going to say, you know what, time to cut bait. That's kind of worth.
Yeah, I didn't think there was. I thought they just non-tender him. He become a free agent and he can do whatever he wants on July 1st. That's what I assumed was going to happen with Nick Robertson. It's like if he was of no use to you in the playoffs and he has arbitration rights, you might as well just let that guy walk. Like it's one thing if he's a useful piece to you and someone who you like and someone who adds to your group, but if he doesn't do those things and he doesn't really mesh with the style that you're trying to implement, why are you holding them here? Why are you holding them back? I don't know. It'll be interesting to see how this all kind of plays out. Another player, actually, that I am curious to see what their future will be like with the franchise is Ryan Reaves. And he had an interesting quote on the Cam and Strick podcast earlier today. Why don't we take a break, come back, and talk about the future of Revo and the Maple Leafs and what he would like to do moving forward. We'll get to that and more next on the Locked On Leafs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. Welcome into the Locked On Leafs podcast. Mike DiStefano and Dave Morassutti with you here on the podcast. Ryan Reaves was on the Cam and Strick podcast recently, and he had some interesting comment to make about his future and his career and what he would like to do moving forward. Obviously, last year didn't really get to play a whole lot with the Maple Leafs or at the NHL level. He ended up getting demoted down to the Marlies. I believe he ended up playing a handful of games with them, even to be honest, but didn't really get to get back with the big club. He was around as a black ace for the playoffs, but didn't really get to do a whole lot. So this year played 35 games, had just 2 assists, racked up 28 penalty minutes. He did play 1 game or 3 games with the Marlies, did score a goal, but that was pretty much it for this past season. I think both of us, I guess I won't put words in my mouth, in your mouth, but for me, I kind of just assumed that it'd be the similar, status quo on Ryan Reaves. All right, show up to camp, see what you do, but at the end of the day, probably going to bury you in the minors again, and he's going to have to go and either play in the AHL or decide not to report. But I didn't view him as an NHL piece for this Leafs team anymore. Did you?
No, I don't know. There's a reason why Pizzetta was brought in. Younger, cheaper, just Ryan Reaves,
faster, better.
It's just but Ryan Reaves is his whole thing about being the guy that keeps the fly off the flies off the stars. That went out the window the moment that Brad Marchand was able to take out Timothy Liljegren and nothing, no response. To me, you brought in Ryan Reaves to add that, the toughness and, even just, change up the locker room a little bit. Didn't really do much. And look, he deserves an opportunity to at least see out what comes next for him. But I don't know, at his age with that contract, he's going to probably see that there's not really an appetite around the league for it.
Curious what so here are the comments. Actually, I forgot to actually say what the comments were, but Ryan Reaves is currently sitting at 912 games in his career, So he came out and said, I still want to play. I'm 88 games away from 1,000 right now, and I'd love to hold on for another 2 years, hit that mark, and ride into the sunset. I don't think I've got 2 years left. I don't think I've got more than 2 years left, but the dream is always the Stanley Cup. When I first came in the league, I remember telling my wife, wouldn't it be cool if I played 100 games, then it was 200, then it was 500. Now I'm thinking maybe I chase 1,000. For a player who's like me, that'd be pretty cool accomplishment. So Stanley Cup and 1,000 games in that order. That was when he was talking about his NHL future and playing with the Maple Leafs. And I just don't see that happening. Like 88 games, it's certainly not going to happen with the Maple Leafs. I can assure you that. I wonder if he really wants to do that, if he really wants to play 1,000 games in the NHL. The only possible way I see that happening is if these two sides mutually terminate this contract and he signs on with a bottom dwelling team and just goes, plays a fourth line grinder role and just plays a good leadership role. Maybe it's a Chicago or I don't know, maybe goes to Pittsburgh for the vibes because that team's anywhere. San Jose, maybe Buffalo, since they probably want to tank for McKenna with the Pagula, Pagula connection there. That might be the only way possible I see this happening. But even still, 88 games, like that's 2 full years. This guy hasn't played, that many games in quite some time. So I don't see that being the case. 912 games is nothing to snuff at. Like that's a lot of games played for a grinder, for a guy whose career high was 9 goals.
A guy who was a 5th round pick back in 2005.
Yeah, right? Like he was a Crosby draft year. Him and Sidney Crosby and Carey Price all in the same draft. And, they're probably 2 of the only guys who's still left from that draft. It might just be those 2. Kopitar, okay. Kopitar.
Was Corey Perry in that draft?
No, I think he was in
04.
03.
He's 03-04.
03-04 draft. It's Crosby, Kopitar, Letang. Letang's still around. Mark-Edward Vlasic is waiting to get a contract. He just got bought out. So, we'll see what happens there. But as of now, he does not have a contract or a team. I think that's it. That might be it. Is Hjalmarsson still
Nope.
kicking? No, he's not there anymore. Well, yeah, really. So that's it. You've got 4 guys pretty much who are currently under contract with teams from that draft class. So he outlasted all but 4 guys in the NHL. He should be pretty proud of himself, even if he doesn't hit the 1,000 mark. Playing 912 games, it's pretty solid, if you ask me. Good.
He beat out quite a good number of players too that were picked way before him.
Oh yeah. There's one player who was picked after him that played more games than him. Just one. He's a former Maple Leaf. I'm curious. I doubt you'll come up with the name, but I'm curious if you could.
Oh man, former Maple Leaf that played more.
There's no shot. There's no shot.
Was it? Is the defenseman?
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of 05. Ah, man.
Anton Strawman.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Strawman was a 7th rounder for Toronto that year. Went on to play 938 games. The only player picked after him to play more, Ryan Reaves, the only player in the 5th round to play 900 games. Everyone else is, besides Strawman, everyone else is picked way, way ahead of those guys in the draft.
And Strawman's still playing. He was still playing last year too, I think. Barely.
I think he was, but he was, or was he in? Let me see.
He's in Sweden. He's back in Sweden.
Yeah, he's been in Sweden for a few years, actually. Yeah, Hjalmarsson hasn't played in a few seasons. He stopped in 2020, 2021. So when Arizona said, we're going to Mullet Arena, he said, pass. I'm out. And he pulled shoot after that whole Arizona situation. Yeah, exactly. So Ryan Reaves, good career. I don't see him getting to 1,000. and he definitely will not happen if he's still a member of the Toronto Maple Leafs. And he's got one more year left on his deal at 1.35. Unfortunately, if he wants to do this, the only logical way for him to make this happen, I'm not sure anyone trades for that contract. Although there's a lot of cap space out there. I suppose you could do a futures trade if you wanted to. But probably just honestly sign or just do a termination, like mutually terminate that contract and let him sign wherever he wants for league minimum. And that would probably be the only way that he could potentially get to 1,000 games, but not going to do it here in Toronto and on that contract. Absolutely not.
Yeah, it just doesn't for me. It just doesn't seem like the door's closed on him in Toronto, unless he like has just this unreal training camp. I don't see it, and I think the Leafs should have probably have. I think they said, look, if we did the buyout, it costs
more money. They can bury the entire deal for the most part. I think it only costs.
They should have tried to find a way to mutually like terminate that deal. Like I don't know why
they still can put him on waivers for purpose of a mutually terminated contract. Like they could do that for sure. Who did that this year? Gave up quite a bit of money. There was a player that did that who gave up a lot of money to sign elsewhere. I'm trying to think. Was it Brendan Saad? Yeah, I think it was Brendan
Saad with the Blues, and then he went to go to Vegas.
Yeah, and he had like another year or two on that deal, and he was like, I'm done. Like, I don't want to play here anymore. I want to go chase a cup. And he ended up signing with Vegas. And I think he re-signed
in Vegas.
Yeah, re-signed in Vegas too. So, he's getting made whole, I guess, this year by getting some dough.
I think it's $2 million he's on this year, and
he probably still left money on the table. But
he gave up. Yeah, there was like I think his deal in St. Louis was like.
Well, I think he was making a decent amount, but I don't know.
4.5, I think, is what his contract was.
It was front loaded or back loaded or what the situation was.
I think the last year was worth like peanuts on that deal.
Yeah, so he gave that up and is making it now in Vegas instead. But yeah, that's my understanding of where things are at when it comes to the Maple Leafs and Ryan Reaves. I think he's played his last game in a Leaf uniform. So like if he plans to get to 1,000 and play in 88 more regular season games, that's 2 years. You have to play two more seasons to get to that number and stay healthy throughout those 2 years as well. Ain't gonna be with Toronto. I can guarantee you that. All right, buddy. You know what? We're gonna have to kick the CBA talk down the road again, I think, and get into that conversation on tomorrow's podcast. And we'll continue with the trade target or trade hunt continues. That'll do it for us here today on the podcast. I'd like to thank you all for listening and supporting the show. You can subscribe to the Locked On Leafs podcast on all platforms and receive daily Leafs content. Follow myself on Twitter at Mickey_Canuck. Follow Dave at D_Morassutti, and follow the show as well at Locked On Leafs. We'll be back with another episode for you guys tomorrow. Until then, keep it locked right here on Locked On Leafs.